Hello, my name is Stacy Cope, Senior Pastor of Tower of Refuge Church in Dublin, Virginia. One of my friends, Chris Maxwell, one of his newest books have just came out. The title is Slow and Sudden God. Chris is a phenomenal writer, phenomenal author. One thing that I love about Chris, God gives certain people talents, and some people he gives gifts. Chris is not only a talented writer, he's a gifted writer. In his new book of poetry, A Slow and Sudden God, how we all can relate in times of our life when we feel like God's slow. But yet at the same time, when he answers the prayer, he works suddenly. So I can relate to that in my own personal life about how God can be slow but yet sudden, but always amazing. I want to encourage you, friends and family, to go out and purchase this book. What a wonderful testimony it will be for you and your family to be able to read his words, what God has given him, to give him the glory. Hope you have a wonderful day. God bless.
So many great things that I could say about Pastor Chris, but I'll keep it short here. I've been knowing him for over a decade, and he's been a continuous source of encouragement and support. He's been someone that I admire, not only as an individual in our community or on campus, but as a writer, ranging from his Pause series to this new book, Slow and Sudden God. And my favorite thing about it is not only are the writings tremendous, but the perspective from which he writes, that vulnerability, that honesty, that transparency that you feel buried within the text. That is exactly who he is in real life. And I'm a big fan of when the artist reflects the art and vice versa. I appreciate that with this book. And I encourage anyone who's unfamiliar with Pastor Chris Maxwell to set aside some time to get in front of these books and just read some of the content on these pages, because it'll truly change your life. And again, it's just been an honor and a blessing just knowing that he's somebody that I can count on and rely on to be real with me, real as he is in those pages. And he's always been cheering me on. He's always offered me a platform and a venue to use my talents and hone my crafts. And I just appreciate him, man. And I know so many others do. But Pastor Chris, man, you truly are a blessing. Thank you for all that you've done for me in my life. And I'll champion and stand behind any endeavor that you find yourself on. Thank you for just being who you've been in my life.
Hi, I'm Tracy Venables. I serve as Vice President for Student Development at Emmanuel College. And today I want to share with you just a minute about my dear friend Chris Maxwell and his latest book, Slow and Sudden God. You know, Chris is an arbiter of words. He literally is a master of the English language and all the nuance, and he has the ability to take deep theological thought and distill it down in just a handful of poignant words. And poetry, I'd never thought about this book, but poetry is such a great medium for him because of the way he thinks. So I have to say, I've read all of his books, but his last one is so timeless. Poetry, man, I'm not a big poetry fan, but quite honestly, God spoke to me in some very direct and personable ways, maybe because I've been about this for about 40 years, and that's the span of this book. But he goes into great depth about just everyday common things we go through. And Chris is just unbelievably real and genuine, comes out of struggle, comes out of a sincere love. And you just sense that. I feel like when you read Chris Maxwell, you feel like you're talking to a friend. And he is one of my dearest and most loved friends. So I would recommend to you, get a copy of this book. Share it in a small group. Use it with your staff or your team. But at least read it yourself. Maybe a poem a day. But you'll probably find yourself reading 5 or 6 a day. But you can't do without this wonderful new tool from Chris. You'll be glad you did. Thank you so much.
My name is Garrett Bain. I work for an insurance company, but at heart, I'm a musician and a songwriter. I've known Chris for so many years that they have now stretched into decades. And probably 30 years ago, he said 5 words that have stuck with me. Admit it and quit it. There have been many times that I've had to apply that to myself, but I've also had the opportunity of passing that wisdom along to others along the way. And as I was going through the pages of A Slow and Sudden God, I realized that Chris has other important words and principles that we can take with us as we go through our years. One I would say is write it to fight it, and also express it to confess it. There are things that you just need to get out sometimes. And I believe that as you read through Chris's poetry, you will be able to put words to some of the feelings that you have had. And who knows, some of those words may stick with you for 30 years or longer, just like his words have with me.
Hi, my name is Tim Lamb, Conference Superintendent Bishop of Life Point Ministries of the IPHC. I have the distinct honor and privilege to work with a good friend of mine by the name of Chris Maxwell. Chris serves on my council with Life Point Ministries, but more than that, he is a dear friend of mine. In fact, what I like about Chris is that just out of the blue, just out of the ordinary, he will text me in the morning time, the afternoon, in the evening, just different days, different times. No rhyme or rhythm with that. But he'll just text and say, how are you doing? Praying for you today. Just means so much to us as a friend. But I wanted to share with you just briefly about this book, A Slow and Sudden God. It's a book of poems, and what I encourage you to do is be sure to buy this book. Get this book, take it, read. I encourage you to read 1 poem per morning and let God speak to you through this book that Chris has written. He's written several books, and you would enjoy and be blessed by reading any of his books. Chris is not only a great friend, he's a great writer, he's a great speaker. I've used him on a number of occasions in different settings in churches and at conferences, and he is a man of God, a man that knows how to speak, communicate well, both verbally and writing. God bless you. Thank you for listening to this video.
Hi, my name is Rick Womack. I pastor a church in Northeast Georgia. One of my friends and one of the members, the attendees of our church, is a guy by the name of Chris Maxwell. And Chris is an author. He's been a prayer partner. He's been a trusted friend for many years now. Chris has written a book titled A Slow and Sudden God. It's subtitled 40 Years of Wonder. And I want to take just a moment as Chris's friend and as his pastor and say, this is a book that everyone should read. Maybe poetry isn't your thing. Maybe you're not used to sitting down and reading a collection of poems. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not all that used to it. However, as I've enjoyed this book, as I've worked from cover to cover through it, what I've found is that it's forced me to slow down some. It's forced me to slow down in my thinking and in my speaking and in my reading and genuinely contemplate what I'm reading and reflect. It's really neat because I have the benefit of being able to know Chris very well and spend time with him. So as I'm reading the book, it's almost like Chris is there reading it to me. So again, A Slow and Sudden God, 40 Years of Wonder by Chris Maxwell, a wonderful book that every person should read.
My name is Russell Board. For the past 35 years, I've served as a missionary with IPHC World Missions, first in Europe and now in Asia. I haven't known Chris Maxwell that long, though I've known him through mutual friends. Recently, our paths have crossed more often, for which I'm thankful, and our friendship is deepening. I felt honored when Chris asked me to read the manuscript of his first book of poetry, A Slow and Sudden God. I think of prose as truth that is systematized and processed and presented in logical form, while poetry is truth in concentrated form, more imagery than syllogism. Now, it seems to me that Chris naturally thinks and writes in poetry. At least he has a knack or a gift for using words to communicate the essence of life as it is lived, raw and real. If you talk with Chris, you'll be pleased to discover that he really listens. He's genuinely curious and interested in the world and in life. He actually cares about the people around him. Because of this, he sees a lot that others miss. His heart is open as well as his eyes. In this book, Chris interacts with Scripture, with friends, with nature, with time, with disease, with mystery, with joy, with tragedy, with love, and with God, and always with wonder. A slow and sudden God, indeed.
Hi, I'm Doug Beecham. I'm the General Superintendent of the International Pentecostal Holiness Church. Let me read some lines to you. Words fit together. Words fall apart. Not controlled, not controlling. It's about noticing. Noticing now, the same. Noticing again, differently, and again, and differently again. Those lines are from this amazing little book by Chris Maxwell, A Slow and Sudden God, 40 Years of Wonder. It's poetry. I enjoy reading poetry. It's a challenge at times because it's not prose narrative. It's a different way of telling story. You read poetry, a lot of you do, when you read the Bible, when you read the Psalms, you read Proverbs, you're reading poetry. Poetry opens us up to a different way of understanding what God is saying to us and what others are saying to us. I want to encourage you, take some time to read this book. You're not going to read this in a hurry. This is the kind of book you pause with. It's the kind of book that you reflect upon. Take it on a vacation. Meditate on it, reflect on it. Pick it up after your reading of Scripture in the morning or in the evening and read some of the poetry that Chris has written. Chris is an amazing person. He's a godly man, but he's a man dealing with a major handicap that came his way. He suffered a severe, almost deadly attack of encephalitis, pushing some, about 1995, 1996, pushing some 20 plus years ago. And yet, much to the surprise of doctors, he has come back, and it's just absolutely amazing in the insights he has about life, about God. This is a book well worth your time. In fact, any of his books are. Thank you, Chris. Thanks for taking time to show us words differently.